Hey everybody, it's Jackie with Jackie's Wreaths and Things. I hope y'all are having a good day. Today we're going to create a wreath or door hanging just using a rag bow. Because we're just using a rag bow for our wreath, I'm going to use 4 yards of material to give it the size that we need. So typically in a wreath you just use 2 yards, but we need more size for this bow in order for it to be more of a wreath. You're going to need something for your backing for the wreath, and that's just for stability for the things that we're going to put in it. I have a couple of options that you can use. One, you can get a really small teardrop swag, or you can get any kind of evergreen swag to use, but you're just going to need something for a base. This is a circle from Unique in the Creek. This is the smaller circle from the modified board. People typically use this to make smaller flowers, and I just thought that this would be a perfect way to be able to stabilize the bow and also be able to hang it. So that's what I'm going to use, but don't limit. You don't have to have this. Like I said, you can do it with an evergreen base, and you can even, if you think about it, you just really need something really good to hang it, you can use a small grapevine to do it. So let's get started. So typically we make the bow pretty, small. It's going to go on a wreath, but that's not the case here. So we're going to do 4 rows of loops and a whole lot more loops because we want this to be really, really full. And I use wire to tie mine as we go. So that's what we're going to do. So let's get started. So I cut my fabric, and the way that I cut it is 1 yard, and then I go the 36 inches. And you just need to tie it in one time. Now, how I picked my fabric was just like I would pick my ribbon, like a ribbon bow. Now, the reason I have the peg in the middle, it's just basically a reminder, marking point that that's the center. It really has no other purposes than that. I think that this will be especially cool come Christmas. Adding Christmas picks into this, which you will see as we go exactly what's going on here, and evergreen pieces and things like that. Now, to make this a really good full bow, I'm going to use 4 pieces of each fabric, and then I've got a little bit of ribbon that I'm going to put between each piece. to add a little bit extra color and texture. I have found that some of the ribbon that I've purchased that wasn't the greatest ribbon, but it does have a wire in it, has been really useful in using putting it in rag bows. So now we have 2 of every color. Now, if you wanted to make this go like really fast, you could probably double up on each color as you go. I just want mine to rotate. That's the look that I want. So if you wanted to, and were able to, you can grab 2 pieces at one time. So now that's 3. So like I said, this is going to be a total of 20 loops. Now, if you're using the Pro bow to make your bow, like I am, be very careful that you're not pulling your pegs in, and leave a little bit of slack so you don't ruin your Pro bow. So like I said, this is going to be a total of 20 pieces. And as far as tying your wire goes, the most important thing is that you tie it tight enough that your fabric doesn't slide out. Because later on we're going to be using zip ties. So that was my last piece of fabric, so I'm going to twist this up really good. And I'm going to cut off the excess. And that's the first layer for our bow. So as you can see, it's going to be really big, and that's exactly what we want. So this was row E. So now I'm going to come into row B. So what I like to do is I like to change up how I pull my colors to hopefully put in a little bit of variety. So this time I'm going to put my ribbon first. And like I said, I'm going to change up how my fabric rotates. And what I'm going to do is keep an eye on how I have it stacked from the previous layer, because I don't want them to match up. This would actually, too, be a good idea for a tree topper. I've had people ask me, well, can you use rag bows as tree toppers? Well, absolutely. Now, if you're going to use, if you planned on doing this as a tree topper, I wouldn't recommend putting a back on it because of how you'll set it on your tree. Now I'm kind of gently holding these until I push it down on the peg, so I'm not pulling the pegs in with it. Now the reason I'm rotating my brown is because it's going to have a tail, because the fabric was a little bit longer, but that's just going to add character as we build the rag bow later on. And if you think about it, these tails hanging out kind of helps you count how many loops you've done. So we know we've got one more set to do, because we're going to do a total of 16 again. Actually, it ends up being a total of 20 with the ribbon. Now these are the tall pegs that I'm using, and you get these with your Pro Bow. And you can also, if you have a all-in-one, you can use your all-in-one to do the same thing. And I just started with the wrong piece of fabric. Somebody else may not notice, but I sure will. Now let's do that again. one more piece of ribbon for this layer. Once again, we'll twist the wire up really good. And we'll lay that there. Okay, so we're going to come in and we're going to do the same thing again. We just got to do this 2 more times. So this time, since I started with the ribbon here, I'm not going to start with it this time. And once again, I'm going to look at how my colors rotate. I'm going to start with the green because it's smaller. I want to see. Nope, it won't yet. So I was wanting to see is if it was going to wrap twice. And the green is actually considerably shorter. So if you have tails from your fabric, it's just going to add to the charm of the rag bow as we go. Said I'm not holding on tight. I'm pushing down because I definitely do not want to pull my pegs in. Now what I'm going to make sure with my brown this time is that my tail goes over here. And I'll do the same with the orange. And since the yellow tail's over here, I'll put it on the other side. So obviously something like this, as you can see, it's going to take a little bit longer than making your typical wreath. So don't forget when you're thinking about how much you'll charge for it, that you include your time. If you do this for gifts, this is definitely a great gift idea. You can make these for baby showers and put all kinds of baby goodies in them, which you'll see. Just the possibilities are going to be endless with what you can do. So this is the last one. So I definitely want to make sure this time that all my tails go to the right, because I've only got one brown tail over here and one yellow and one orange. So we're going to make sure everything goes to the right hand side. Alright, so remember we didn't start out using ribbon, so we're not going to finish using ribbon to keep a good alternation of color going. we've got one last one to go. And then we'll be ready to actually start building our project. I'm going to use a little bit more wire because I kind of was running short. Alright, so let's start out with the ribbon this time. And then for the last time, I'm going to look and see how my colors rotated. And I think what I'm going to do, just to keep it simple, is go right from left. So what I'm going to do to try to conserve on fabric this time is I'm going to try, now that we've gotten down and it's pretty small, what I'm going to try to do is wrap this twice. So it gets a little bit confusing, but you won't have to use as much fabric this time. So I wrapped twice over here, so now with my green I'm going to wrap twice over here. So I wrapped twice over here, so now we're going to wrap twice to this side. Now with the brown, we'll do the same thing. We'll wrap twice to this side. And that is going to keep our stack even as we go. Now I haven't cut the tails off up to this point. I don't want the tails sticking out on the very, very top. So this time I'm going to cut it off. All right. Let's put in our piece of ribbon. And now it's going to get just a little bit more confusing. Now, I wrapped twice with my orange over here. So because I don't want this side to be orange heavy, I'm going to make sure to wrap twice with my orange over here because our stack is even. So we want to make sure that we're even on color as well. So we wrap twice over here, so we want our green to go twice this way. Alright, so what we're going to do to make sure the center of our bow is really, really full. Now, actually, we have the same amount of ribbon right now, or excuse me, fabric right now in our stack that we do here, but to make the center really, really full, we're going to do one more row. Because remember, we were doubling up on the loops as we go. So we did 1, 2, so we'll do, and I'm just double checking to make sure. So we'll do 2 orange over here on this side to start. A little bit of thought process and remembering which way your loops go, but it saves on material and it's going to give you more for your tail for your bow. Last piece of brown, and then one more piece of ribbon. Now, believe it or not, after we make the bow, the next part's going to go pretty fast. So this is really the most tedious part. So if you're doing this, sit down with a good movie and just enjoy yourself. set that there. So now we want to actually build our tail. So you have to decide how long you want your tail. Now for me, because this is a wreath, I know my fabric is about 36 inches, so I'm going to want the back of my tail to be pretty long. This is going to go hang on a door, so I want it to have this very large, grand look. So what I'm going to do for the back, and I'm going to list something a little bit different to tie my tails because it's easier to get a hold of and it's not going to show up, but this is called tinsel wire, and you can really get this time of year in your Christmas section at Walmart. But I'm going to use this instead of the fabric because there's going to be a lot of weight to it and I don't want the fabric to rip. So I'm going to lay this down and out of the way. I'll tuck it under my board. So what I'm going to do with my pieces is I'm going to basically take two of each and go left to right and just leave a little bit up here to hang on to so that my tails will be long. And I'm going to do this with about half of my stacks of fabric. I'm going to move this stack. I need to push that up on my board just a little bit so that these don't fall off. Now, I guess I could tie this in a knot, but it will create too much bulk doing that. I'm also going to incorporate a piece of ribbon into my tail. Now this does not have to be perfect because that's the best part of a rag bow is the imperfections in it. So I'm kind of looking and kind of counting as I go to what I have left. Like I said, I'm going to use about half the stack for the long tails. So we're going to do this one more time. Now, I could have cut my fabric longer. However, I knew that in cutting it longer, the length would not be manageable for the ripping and dipping. So I wanted to keep it a manageable length. So if I wanted to, I could have took 1/4 yard and cut it just specifically for this, but then I would have had to mess with trying to hang fabric this long. Okay, so now that we have these, we're going to pull our tinsel wire out and we're going to go ahead and tie this. Like I said, tinsel wire, it's a whole lot easier to grab it and twist. So that's why I chose to use the tinsel wire. Alright, so once again, now we're ready to do our single pieces. So I'm going to lay that back down. And now we're just going to rotate our single pieces along. So it just kind of gets quicker because you're just going to lay them there. And this is what's going to create more fullness and depth to our bow tail. Now, some people worry about the strings. I don't. Because once again, it is part of the charm. Now, if they're like really, really long, once I'm done making the bow, I will go and cut them. But I'm not going to stress over it. So I'm looking over and I notice that my orange and my green is going to layer up a couple more times. I've got 4 pieces left over here and just 2 of these colors. So what I'm going to do to even it out a bit is I'm going to take 2 orange pieces this time. And then 2 green. Orange, oops, ribbon. Two orange. And now we're going to tie that up. So the tinsel wire makes it so much easier to grab your layers. And tighten them down. And as you can see, that's a really nice long, full tail for your bow. All right, take a break from making your rag bow and come on back, and we're going to finish up and we're going to build this thing.